I've been driving long-haul routes for over a decade. Most of the time, it's just hours of open road, stale coffee, and the occasional strange encounter at a rest stop. But nothing compares to that night in 2017, when I took a route through the Mojave Desert. The sky was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows everything. My truck's headlights were dim, something I'd been meaning to fix but kept putting off. Out here, with no other cars in sight, it was painfully obvious how weak they were. My eyes strained to make out the road ahead, the faded yellow lines barely visible in the distance. The thought of pulling over and waiting for sunrise crossed my mind, but I needed the money, and stopping wasn't an option. I was an hour from sunrise when something caught my eye, movement in the distance. A dark shape approached fast. My first instinct was to slam the brakes, thinking it was an animal. The tires screeched against the asphalt as the truck shuddered to a halt. When the dust settled, I saw it clearly, a car, parked dead center on the road, hazard lights flashing. It wasn't just in my lane, it was directly on the double yellow. Stranger still, the passenger door was wide open. I sat there for a moment, watching. There was no movement inside, no sign of anyone. The way the door stood open, it felt wrong. But curiosity got the better of me. I put the truck in reverse, pulling off to the side before stepping out. The night was eerily still. No wind, no sounds, except for the faint clicking of the hazard lights. I approached cautiously, my boots crunching against the gravel. The car was a newer model, red, clean. No signs of damage. I leaned into the open door and called out. No answer. I walked around to the driver's side, peering in. Empty. I checked the back seat, the floorboards, even the trunk. Nothing. A strange chill crawled up my spine. Something wasn't right. I turned in slow circles, scanning the darkness. My gut told me someone was out there, watching. But I couldn't see them. The car's key was still in the ignition, but the engine wasn't running. I hesitated before reaching inside, pulling the key free. The thought crossed my mind, what if someone needed help? But why leave the car in the middle of the road like that? And where the hell were they? My unease grew stronger, but I forced myself to keep looking. If this was some kind of setup, I needed to know what I was dealing with. I made my way to the trunk, gripping the key tighter. When I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. Locked. But when I went back to the back seat and pushed from inside, it popped open. Inside were 3 garbage bags, bulging, tightly tied. A thick rope coiled around them like something had been secured in place. I reached out, about to tug one open. A gunshot shattered the silence. I jerked back, slamming my head against the roof of the car. My ears rang from the blast, my pulse hammering. I spun toward the darkness, my breath stuck in my throat. Then I heard it. A voice. Rough, urgent. Hey. It was coming closer. I didn't think. I threw the keys onto the front seat and bolted. My boots barely touched the ground as I sprinted for my truck. The voice was getting louder, angrier. I grabbed the door handle, yanked it open, and scrambled inside. My fingers fumbled over the ignition as my breath came in ragged gasps. The truck's engine sputtered before roaring to life. And then I saw him, standing at the trunk of the red car, staring straight at me. A short, stocky man with red hair, overalls, and tall boots. A small shovel in one hand, an old hunting rifle in the other. He didn't move at first, just stood there, watching me. Then, as my truck started to roll forward, he dropped the shovel and lifted his hands, waving frantically. Wait, he shouted, stepping forward. His expression wasn't what I expected. It wasn't crazed, wasn't angry. He looked worried, but there was no way in hell I was stopping. I shoved the pedal to the floor, forcing the truck to pick up speed. The man ran after me for a few steps before turning and sprinting back toward his car. And that's when I saw his headlights flare to life in my side mirror. He was coming after me. The red car's headlights flared in my side mirror, and the engine roared to life. He was coming after me. My hands were slick with sweat as I gripped the wheel, pushing my truck to speeds it had no business reaching. The desert highway stretched ahead, endless and black, the only illumination coming from my weak headlights and the menacing glow of the car tailing me. He was getting closer. I reached for my phone with one hand, blindly stabbing at the screen to dial 911. My heart pounded as the call connected, a dispatcher's voice crackling through the speaker. I need help, I gasped, as darting between the road and the rearview mirror. There's a guy, he had a gun, he's chasing me. Sir, where are you located? Shit. I had no idea. Middle of nowhere, somewhere between California and Arizona. I don't know. I'm on Highway 62, I think. The dispatcher was saying something, but my attention snapped back to the mirror. The red car was inching closer, its high beams blinding me. My truck wasn't built for this kind of speed. If he wanted to run me off the road, he probably could. Then, just as I braced for impact, the red car cut left, swerved off the road into the desert. Dust exploded in my mirror as he fishtailed into the sand, his tires carving deep scars into the earth. His headlights bounced erratically, then vanished completely. Gone. I let out a shaky breath, but my body refused to relax. What the hell had just happened? Had he lost control? Or, then I saw it. Ahead, another set of headlights. No, not headlights. Flashlights. 3 of them, waving frantically in the darkness just beyond the shoulder. My pulse slammed against my ribs. People. Out here. In the middle of nowhere. The dispatcher's voice buzzed in my ear. "Sir, are you still there?" I ignored her. My foot eased off the gas as I squinted through the windshield. The figures stood at the edge of the road, their movements frantic, like they were desperate to be seen. Something about it felt wrong. I slowed just enough to make them out. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in tattered clothes. Their faces were gaunt, sunken-eyed. And they weren't just standing there. They were pointing, not at me, at the desert, at the spot where the red car had disappeared. A deep, crawling dread settled in my stomach. My fingers clenched the wheel as I watched them, my truck rumbling past at a crawl. One of them, the woman, stepped forward, her mouth moving rapidly, though I couldn't hear her. Then I realized. She wasn't waving me down. She was warning me. Suddenly, the red car's headlights reappeared, jolting back to life in the distance. But it wasn't moving. It just sat there in the dark, idling, its beams aimed toward the sand. I didn't wait to find out what was happening. I slammed the gas. The truck roared forward, the figures disappearing behind me, swallowed by the night. My breathing came in ragged bursts as I gripped the wheel, every nerve in my body screaming to keep driving. For 5, 10, 15 minutes, I didn't see another car. Didn't see anything at all. Then, a voice crackled through my phone. "Sir." I had forgotten about the dispatcher. I swallowed hard, throat dry. Sorry, I hesitated, glancing in my mirror. The road behind me was empty. I think I lost him. "Are you in a safe location now?" I let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, I think so. I had no intention of stopping, not until I reached civilization. But something gnawed at the back of my mind, a sickening thought I couldn't shake. That man in the red car. He had been running from something. Not chasing me. Running. And those people by the road, they hadn't been stranded. They had been trapped. Story 2. I started trucking when I was 22, fresh out of a job I hated and looking for something that would keep me moving. I'd heard the horror stories. Truckers finding hitchhikers where they shouldn't be, shadows shifting in the middle of empty roads, voices coming from places where no one should be. I always thought those were just stories. Until that night. It was supposed to be a simple route, southern New Jersey to Indiana, a 12-hour drive through the night. The company I worked for didn't care how I got the deliveries done, as long as I made them on time. And I was determined to push through in one go. By hour 10, exhaustion started creeping in, the lines on the road blurring together. My eyes burned, my limbs felt heavy, and I realized with irritation that I'd run out of energy drinks. I hated stopping, but I had no choice. The first stop I saw was a gas station. No, a ghost of one. The fluorescent lights flickered weakly, and the pumps were rusted over. The attached convenience store looked half abandoned, its sign missing letters like a mouth with broken teeth. But the open sign glowed red in the window. I pulled the truck into the lot, the tires crunching against loose gravel. The place looked deserted, but I figured I could be in and out in a minute. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air smelled stale, like something had been left rotting too long. The aisles were mostly empty, just a few old cans and bags of chips covered in dust. The refrigerator hummed weakly in the back, its glass doors fogged over. No one was behind the counter. No one was anywhere. I took a step forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath my boots. I should have left right then, but my exhaustion clouded my judgment. I was already inside, might as well grab something and go. That's when I heard it. A click. Soft. Mechanical. Almost rhythmic. It came from behind the counter. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I leaned over to look. The cash register was open, and a hand was inside it. Not a human hand. A mannequin's hand. A stiff, plastic hand, jointed at the knuckles like a doll's, its fingers resting against a pile of crumpled bills. For a long moment, I just stared. My exhausted brain refused to process what I was seeing. There was no mannequin in the store. The hand was just there, sticking out of the register like it had been reaching for something. Then the fingers twitched. I stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. The register let out a sudden metallic chime, its drawer slamming shut. The lights in the store flickered, once, twice, then cut out completely. I ran. My hand fumbled for the door, but the moment my fingers touched the handle, I heard the sound of footsteps, not from inside the store, from the ceiling, heavy, slow, pacing directly above me. Then, a single knock came from the ceiling tiles, right above my head. I didn't wait to find out who *** or what *** was up there. I shoved the door open and bolted back to my truck, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My heart pounded against my ribs as I climbed into the cab and slammed the door shut. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, gripping the wheel, listening. The gas station was silent. The windows dark. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But then, I looked at the store's front window, and something was standing there. A figure, not a person, a mannequin. Its featureless face pressed against the glass, hands splayed out, fingers moving like it was trying to get out, trying to get to me. I slammed the truck into drive and peeled out of that lot, the engine roaring as I sped down the highway. My hand shook as I forced my breath to slow, my mind racing to process what had just happened. I didn't look back, but 20 minutes later, I glanced at my side mirror and saw a single plastic handprint smeared against the glass. I didn't stop driving. Not for an hour, not for two. My fingers were locked around the steering wheel, my pulse thudding in my ears. The plastic handprint on my side mirror stayed there, a sickening reminder that what I'd seen wasn't just exhaustion messing with my head. That gas station, whatever was inside it, was real. I forced myself to breathe, gripping the wheel tighter. The rational part of my brain told me to stop at the next truck stop, wash my face, maybe even sleep for a bit. But the thought of pulling over made my skin crawl. The highway was quiet. Too quiet. Even with no other cars on the road, truckers usually kept their CB radios on. There was always some chatter, someone complaining about the route, some guy talking about his last delivery. But tonight, my radio was silent. The farther I drove, the more I started to feel it, that wrongness. That feeling like I wasn't alone, like something was just beyond the edges of my vision, watching. Then, my headlights caught something up ahead. A shape. A figure standing in the middle of the road. My foot slammed the brakes before I even realized it. The truck screeched to a halt, the smell of burning rubber filling the cab. My breath caught in my throat as I stared through the windshield. There, illuminated in my high beams, stood a mannequin. Not in a store. Not behind glass. Standing. In the middle of the goddamn highway. It was different from the one at the gas station. This one wore clothes, a faded hoodie, jeans, old sneakers. Its plastic arms hung stiff at its sides, its featureless head tilted just slightly, as if it were listening. I felt something cold and electric crawl up my spine. Then, it moved. Not walked. Twitched. Its fingers jerked unnaturally, the joints bending in ways they shouldn't. I threw the truck into reverse, my heart hammering. The mannequin just stood there, blocking the road, unmoving except for those twitching fingers. Then my radio crackled to life. A burst of static. And a voice. At first, it was just garbled noise, warped and broken. But as the static cleared, I heard it. A whisper. Don't stop. Every muscle in my body went stiff. I hadn't touched the radio, hadn't changed the channel. The whisper came again, clearer this time. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't look back. I was shaking. My foot pressed against the accelerator, but I hesitated. I didn't know what was worse, the thing in front of me or the voice warning me about something else. Then, the mannequin took a step forward. I floored it, not in reverse. Forward. The truck roared as I stomped the gas, the wheels screaming against the pavement. The mannequin didn't move. It just stood there, its arms stiff at its sides, waiting, until the very last second. Then, it vanished. I didn't hit anything. No impact. No resistance. I should have crushed it under 18 wheels. But as I plowed through where it had been standing, there was nothing. The second I passed, my headlights flickered. The cab light stuttered. My radio cut out. For a breathless moment, there was only silence. Then, from the passenger seat, I heard a faint, plastic click, like stiff fingers tapping. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I just kept driving, knuckles white on the wheel, praying I wasn't imagining things. After what felt like forever, the highway lights appeared in the distance. A real truck stop. Civilization. I pulled into the lot so fast I barely managed to park straight. My hands were still shaking as I killed the engine and took a breath. The cab was empty. No mannequin. No plastic limbs. No one in the passenger seat. But when I turned my head, I saw something on the dashboard. A single, stiff plastic finger, resting there like it had been placed on purpose. I left it there. I didn't sleep that night. I never took that route again. And to this day, whenever I pass an empty gas station, I keep my foot on the gas. And I never stop. Story 3. I've been a trucker for a long time. Long enough to see plenty of weird things on the road. People appearing out of nowhere. Ghost towns with working neon signs. Stretches of highway that never seem to end. But nothing compares to what I encountered 4 years ago in Montana. It was supposed to be an easy haul. A warehouse in North Dakota had loaded me up with freight, and I was set to deliver it to a spot just past the Montana border. I planned my route carefully, making sure I wouldn't need to stop until I reached my destination. I don't take breaks unless I absolutely have to. And that night, I had to. I had been driving for nearly 10 hours straight. My eyelids were getting heavy, and my vision blurred at the edges. I could feel the exhaustion creeping in, making my body slow, making my thoughts lag. I reached for my smelling salts, something a buddy of mine had introduced me to. One sniff, and my whole system would jolt awake. But when I grabbed the small bottle, my hand froze. Because something was wrong. The road ahead wasn't empty anymore. There was something lying across the highway. I snapped fully awake, my pulse hammering as I slammed the brakes. The truck lurched, the tires screeching against the pavement. My rig slowed just in time, stopping inches from the object in the road. I swallowed hard and stared. It was a bicycle. A small, blue bicycle, lying on its side in the dead center of the highway. The front wheel was still spinning slightly, as if it had been dropped just moments before. A sick feeling curled in my gut. I looked around. The road was dark, stretching endlessly in both directions. Flatlands on either side. Nowhere for someone to hide. But if there was a bike, then there had to be a rider. I turned on my high beams, scanning the roadside. Nothing. I should have driven around it. Should have ignored it. But then I saw something else. Further down the road, barely visible in the glow of my headlights, was a single shoe. Small. White. Just sitting there. I felt my heartbeat pick up. A child's shoe. I should have left. But I didn't. Instead, I put the truck in park and reached for my flashlight. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay inside, but I forced myself to step out onto the pavement. The air was too still, the kind of eerie silence that made my skin crawl. I walked toward the bike, my boots echoing against the asphalt. I nudged it with my foot, still warm, like someone had been holding it only moments before. I scanned the road again, the vast emptiness stretching beyond my headlights. The shoe sat about 50 feet ahead. I swallowed hard and took a step toward it. Then another, and another. The closer I got, the more I felt like I was being watched. The air felt thicker, pressing in around me. I bent down, picking up the shoe with trembling fingers. It was clean. Too clean. Like it had been placed there on purpose. Then, a sound. A clicking sound. Coming from behind me. I spun around, heart hammering. My flashlight beam wobbled as I swept it across the road. And that's when I saw it. A figure, standing just outside the reach of my headlights. Tall. Motionless. Its head tilted too far to the side, like its neck had been snapped. It didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then, the bicycle moved. It dragged itself backward, scraping against the pavement on its own. I ran. My boots pounded against the asphalt as I sprinted for the truck, lungs burning. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because the moment I reached the driver's seat, I heard it. A child's laugh. Not playful. Not innocent. Wrong. I slammed the door shut, shoved the truck into drive, and hit the gas. The tires screeched, the engine roared, and I didn't stop. But just before I peeled away, I caught one last glimpse in my side mirror. The figure was still there. But now, it was closer. And in its arms, it held something. A child's body. But the head? The head was missing. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just drove. The road blurred under my headlights as the truck thundered down the highway. My hands were locked around the wheel, knuckles white. The figure in the mirror, that thing holding the headless body, it was still burned into my vision. I kept expecting to see something else in the mirror. A shape lunging out of the dark, a shadow moving too fast. But the road behind me remained empty. For a few minutes, I almost convinced myself that I was in the clear. Then, the radio crackled. At first, just static. Then, something else. A child's giggle. Sharp. Too close. I ripped the radio dial off, but the sound didn't stop. The giggle turned into whispers. Soft, fast, layered voices overlapping. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone made my stomach twist. I pressed the gas pedal harder. The truck shouldn't have been going this fast, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. Then, something moved in the passenger seat. I didn't look. I wouldn't look, but I could feel it. A presence. Breathing. Right next to me. Cold air licked at my skin. My peripheral vision caught the smallest hint of motion, the shifting of something small, something watching. And then, a whisper, inches from my ear. You found my shoe. I nearly lost control of the truck. The wheel jerked in my hands, the tires skidding. My breath hitched as I stole a glance at the seat beside me. It was empty, but there was something on the seat now. A head. Small. Pale. The face turned away from me, its blonde hair matted with something dark. I nearly vomited. I slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed wildly before I managed to regain control, my pulse hammering in my throat. The head rolled slightly from the momentum, shifting just enough that I could see its face. And it was grinning. The skin around its lips had been stitched up, crude black thread forcing its mouth into a grotesque, endless smile. I shoved open the door and jumped out. The truck rumbled beside me, its engine still growling, its headlights spilling weak light onto the empty road. I stumbled back, chest heaving, expecting to see, what? That thing? That headless body? But the road was empty. No bicycle. No figure. And when I forced myself to look back at my truck, the passenger seat was empty. No head. No blood. Just a single white shoe, sitting neatly where the head had been. I stared at it, my body trembling. My mind refused to process what had just happened. Then, the laughter started again. Not from my truck. From the trees. Dozens of voices, children's voices, laughing from the darkness. Somewhere in the shadows, something moved. I wasn't staying to find out what. I climbed back into the truck, locked the doors, and gunned it. The laughter followed me for miles, echoing across the empty plains. By the time I made it to my destination, I had convinced myself that I was losing my mind. Maybe I had been hallucinating from exhaustion. Maybe it had all been some kind of waking nightmare. But when I stepped out of the truck and checked the passenger seat one last time, the shoe was gone, and in its place was a crudely sewn doll, its face stitched into a smile.